The Valkyrie had ruled the stars for 11,000 years. They were not like other empires that came before them. They did not negotiate. They did not compromise. They simply arrived, and everything changed. Their ships were mountains of crystal and light. Each one could hold 1,000,000 souls. Each one carried weapons that could turn planets into ash. When the Valkyrie decided they wanted something, they took it. When they decided a species would serve them, that species served. There was no other choice. There had never been another choice. Catharan remembered the day they came to his world. He was young then, barely past his first molting cycle. The Sindari people had built great cities that floated in the clouds of their gas giant home. They had created art that other species traveled light years to see. They had philosophers who debated the nature of existence and scientists who unlocked the secrets of matter itself. None of it mattered when the sky turned dark. The Valkyrie fleet blocked out the stars. Catharan stood with his family on the observation deck of their home station and watched as ship after ship appeared from nothing. The Sindari Defense Force, the pride of their civilization, moved to intercept. The battle lasted less than one rotation of their planet. The Valkyrie did not demand surrender. They simply announced a new order of things. The Sindari would serve. They would provide resources. They would build what the Valkyrie commanded. They would forget their old ways and learn new ones. This was not a request. This was reality. Catharan's father had been a member of the resistance. He died screaming in a Valkyrie correction facility. His mother never spoke of it. She never spoke of anything again, really. She simply worked and slept and eventually stopped doing both. That was 80 cycles ago. Now, Catharan stood in the grand assembly of the tributary worlds. It was a massive chamber built into an artificial moon that orbited a dead star. Representatives from 47 species gathered here to receive their orders. They called it an assembly, but no one assembled to debate or decide. They came to listen and obey. The Valkyrie overseer floated at the center of the chamber. Its body was made of living crystal that bent light in ways that hurt to look at directly. It had no face that Catharan could recognize, but he always felt like it was watching him. Watching all of them dot around him sat the other representatives. The Catharathi, whose warriors had once conquered 3 star systems, now served as laborers in Valkyrie mines. The Auravani, whose ships had explored the far reaches of the galaxy, now transported goods for their masters. The Thelem, the Varga, the crystalline mines of Sector 7, all of them broken, all of them silent, all of them whispers in the wind of the galaxy. The overseer spoke, and its voice filled every translator in the chamber at once. There was no escaping that voice. It crawled inside your mind and made itself at home. There are reports from the outer spiral, the overseer said. A new species has been discovered. They call themselves humanity. Catharan felt nothing at this news. New species were discovered every few cycles. They were offered the same choice everyone else had been offered. Serve or die. They always chose to serve. Everyone chose to serve. Initial contact was made by Scout Fleet 7, the overseer continued. The humans were presented with standard integration terms. Around the chamber, representatives shifted in their seats. This was routine, boring, even. Another species would join the collective. Another voice would become a whisper. They refused. The words hung in the air like something toxic. Catharan felt his secondary heart skip a beat. Refused? Species did not refuse. Refusal was not something that happened. The Valkyrie offered terms, and those terms were accepted. That was how the universe worked. This is not a concern, the overseer said, and somehow its voice carried something that might have been amusement. Scout Fleet 7 has been dispatched to correct the situation. The humans will learn their place, as all species do. The assembly was dismissed. Representatives shuffled out of the chamber in silence, as they always did. But Ketheran noticed something different in the way they moved. There were glances exchanged. Quick looks that meant nothing and everything. A species had refused dot it meant nothing, of course. The Valkyrie would crush them as they had crushed everyone else. In a few cycles, the humans would be just another set of broken people serving masters they could not resist. Their refusal would become a historical footnote, a brief moment of foolishness before reality set in. And yet, Ketheran found himself returning to his quarters and accessing old files. Records that his people were not supposed to keep. Histories of the time before the Valkyrie came. Stories of Sindari warriors who had fought back. Poems about freedom that had not been spoken aloud in generations. He told himself he was simply curious. He told himself it was academic interest. He told himself that one species refusing meant nothing to him. But when he slept that night, he dreamed of his father for the first time in decades. His father, who had believed that some things were worth fighting for. His father, who had died still believing it. The dream faded, as dreams do. Ketheran woke and prepared for another day of service. Another day of silence. Another day of being nothing but a whisper. Somewhere, impossibly far away, a species called humanity was preparing to fight an empire that had never known defeat. Ketheran did not know this. He could not know it. But somewhere deep in his chest, in the place where his people had once kept their courage, something stirred. Something that had been sleeping for 80 cycles began to wake. The Valkyrie believed the matter was settled. They had crushed 10,000 species before. They would crush this one too. Humanity was small and weak and far away. They were nothing but noise, soon to become silence. They were merely a whisper. But whispers, given time and fuel, can become storms, and storms, once started, are very hard to stop. Commander Elena Vasquez stood on the bridge of the UNS Defiance and watched death approach. The Valkyrie fleet hung in the darkness of space like a wall of crystal teeth. 200 warships, each one larger than anything humanity had ever built. They glowed with internal light, beautiful and terrible. Like stars that had learned to hate. Elena had been a soldier for 23 years. She had fought in the water wars of Earth's southern hemisphere. She had helped put down the colony rebellions on Mars. She had trained for every kind of combat humanity could imagine. Nothing had prepared her for this. 30 years ago, before Elena was born, a Valkyrie scout ship had crashed on one of Jupiter's moons. The crew was dead, killed by some malfunction their technology could not prevent. Humanity had found the wreck and kept it secret. For 3 decades, the brightest minds on Earth had studied every piece of that ship. They had learned how Valkyrie technology worked. More importantly, they had learned how it failed. When the Valkyrie finally made official contact, humanity knew exactly what they were dealing with. They also knew that surrender meant the end of everything they had ever been. So they said no. Elena watched the tactical display as the Valkyrie fleet began to move. Her own force was laughably small by comparison. 43 ships, none of them bigger than a Valkyrie shuttle. They were ugly things, built for function rather than beauty, designed in secret shipyards hidden throughout the solar system. They are powering weapons, Lieutenant Chun reported from his station. He was young, barely 22, and his hands were shaking slightly. Elena did not blame him. All ships, she said, keeping her voice calm and steady. Execute Protocol Prometheus. The battle plan was simple because it had to be. Humanity could not match the Valkyrie in firepower or numbers. They could not outrun them or outlast them. The only thing they could do was surprise them. The Valkyrie had never fought a real battle. Not in 11,000 years. The species they conquered always surrendered or were destroyed so quickly that no lessons could be learned. They had forgotten what it meant to face an enemy that truly wanted to kill them. Humanity had never forgotten. The first Valkyrie dreadnought died before its crew understood what was happening. Human ships, small and fast and driven by desperate courage, dove directly into the Valkyrie formation. They released weapons that should not have existed, devices built from stolen technology and human ingenuity. Electromagnetic pulses tore through the crystalline neural networks that controlled Valkyrie systems. Gravity bombs turned their own engines against them. The dreadnought's crystal hull cracked like ice on a frozen lake. Light poured from the wounds, and then the whole ship came apart in a silent explosion that lit up the darkness. For a moment, nothing happened. The Valkyrie fleet seemed frozen, unable to process what they had just witnessed. One of their ships destroyed. By primitives? That moment of hesitation cost them dearly. The human fleet attacked with everything they had. Elena watched her display as ship after ship found its target. The Valkyrie weapons were powerful beyond imagination, and human ships died screaming into the void. But for every human vessel destroyed, 2 or 3 Valkyrie ships joined them in death. The battle was chaos. Elena shouted orders until her voice went raw. She watched good people die, their faces appearing briefly on her screen before winking out forever. Lieutenant Chun's hands stopped shaking after the first hour. He was too busy to be afraid. Around them, the Valkyrie fleet began to fall apart. Not from human attacks alone, but from something worse. Confusion, panic. The Valkyrie had never experienced defeat. They had no procedures for retreat. Their commanders gave conflicting orders, and their ships crashed into each other trying to follow them. When the battle ended, 17 human ships remained from an original force of 43. More than half their fleet was gone. Thousands of sailors floated dead in the wreckage of their vessels, but the Valkyrie fleet, all 200 ships, was destroyed. Elena Vasquez sat in her command chair and stared at the debris field that stretched across millions of kilometers. She should have felt triumph. She should have felt pride. Instead, she felt only a cold, heavy weight in her stomach. This was not a victory. This was a beginning. "Ma'am," Lieutenant Chun said quietly, "we are receiving transmissions from Earth. They want to know what happened." Elena took a deep breath. Somewhere out there, beyond the boundaries of human space, the Valkyrie Empire was waiting. They had 10,000 fleets like this one. They had weapons that could crack planets like eggs. They had 11,000 years of experience in crushing anyone who dared to resist. And now, they were angry. "Send a message to Earth," Elena said. "Tell them we won the battle. Tell them to prepare for war. The Valkyrie are coming. All of them." She looked at the debris floating past her view screen. Crystals and metal and bodies, all mixed together in the eternal darkness of space. Human and Valkyrie alike, united in death. "They are going to come for us with everything they have," she said to no one in particular. "And we are going to make them pay for every inch." Lieutenant Chun nodded slowly. He was not shaking anymore. None of them were. Somewhere in the distance, a piece of Valkyrie wreckage caught the light of a distant star and glittered, briefly before tumbling back into darkness. The war had begun. The news spread faster than light itself. In the mining colonies of the Sindari, workers stopped their machines and listened to whispered reports. In the shipyards of the Kethrathi, engineers traded stories about a species that had done the impossible. In 1,000 worlds across 100 systems, beings who had never met each other shared the same thought at the same moment. The Valkyrie could be beaten. Catharan heard the news in his quarters aboard the assembly station. He listened to the report 3 times, certain that he had misunderstood. A patrol fleet destroyed. 200 ships turned to debris. The Valkyrie had lost a battle. The Valkyrie did not lose battles. They had not lost a battle in 11,000 years. For 3 days, Catharan did nothing but think. He went to the assembly meetings and sat in silence. He ate his meals and tasted nothing. He lay in his sleeping chamber and did not sleep. On the 4th day, the human ambassador arrived. Her name was Sarah Chun. She came alone, in a small ship that barely deserved the name. She requested permission to address the Grand Assembly, and to everyone's surprise, the Valkyrie Overseer granted it. Perhaps it wanted to make an example of her. Perhaps it was simply curious. The Valkyrie had difficulty understanding why anyone would walk willingly into the heart of their power. The assembly chamber was fuller than Catharan had ever seen it. Representatives from all 47 tributary species crowded into their sections. Their attention focused on the small figure standing at the center of the floor. Sarah Chun was tiny by any standard. She barely reached Catharan's chest, and he was considered short among his own people. She wore a simple uniform with no decorations. She carried no weapons that anyone could see. She stood beneath the floating form of the Valkyrie Overseer, like a mouse standing beneath an eagle, and she did not seem afraid at all. "I know what you are thinking," she said. Her voice was calm and clear, carried by translators to every being in the chamber. "You are thinking that we are fools, that we won one small battle against one small fleet, and now we believe we can challenge an empire. You are thinking that the Valkyrie will crush us, and then they will punish you for even listening to us." The Overseer floated silently above her. Its crystalline body pulsed with light that might have been anger or might have been amusement. It was impossible to tell. "You may be right," Chun continued. "The Valkyrie have 10,000 fleets. We destroyed one. They have ruled for 11,000 years. We have been a spacefaring species for less than 300. By any logical measure, we should surrender. We should accept our place. We should become what you have become." She paused and looked around the chamber. Her eyes met Catharan's for just a moment, and he felt something stir in his chest. "But we cannot," she said. "We are human. We do not know how to surrender. We do not know how to be silent. We have spent our entire history fighting each other, fighting nature, fighting ourselves. We are loud and foolish and stubborn beyond all reason." The chamber was completely still. No one moved. No one spoke. "We know what you were," Chun said. "Before the Valkyrie came, the Sindari created art that made the universe weep with beauty. The Kathrathi explored regions of space that no one had ever seen. The Auravani built ships that could sail between galaxies. You were not servants. You were not whispers. You were songs." Catharan felt something wet on his face. He realized with shock that he was crying. He had not cried since his father died. "The Valkyrie are coming for Earth," Chun said. "They will bring everything they have. They will try to erase us from existence. And we will fight them. We will fight them alone if we must. But we do not want to fight alone." She spread her hands, a gesture that meant openness and honesty in human culture. "We are not asking you to die for us. We are not asking you to throw away your lives on a hopeless cause. We are asking you to remember. Remember who you were. Remember what was taken from you. Remember that once, before the Valkyrie came, you were free." The Overseer finally spoke. Its voice filled the chamber like cold water. "This is treason. This human speaks of rebellion against the natural order. She will be taken to the correction facilities. Any who support her will join her there." No one moved. Then Catharan stood up. He did not know he was going to do it until he was already on his feet. His hearts were pounding. His legs were shaking. Every instinct he had was screaming at him to sit down, to be quiet, to be a good whisper. "The Sindari remember," he said. His voice cracked on the words. "We remember what we were, and we choose to remember again." The Overseer's light pulsed with clear anger. Around the chamber, Ketharan could see other representatives rising to their feet. The Kethrathi ambassador, the Uravani trade minister. One by one, then in groups, then all at once. 40-7 species stood together for the first time in 11,000 years. The overseer looked at them for a long moment. Then it simply vanished, departing for wherever Valkyrie went when they needed to report. Very bad news to their superiors. Sarah Chun smiled at the assembly. It was a small smile, tired and sad and somehow full of hope. "Well," she said quietly, "it seems we are not alone after all." Ketharan looked at the beings standing around him. Old enemies and older friends. Species that had fought each other before the Valkyrie came and had served side by side in silence ever since. For the first time in 80 cycles, he felt something he had forgotten existed. He felt like part of something greater than himself. He felt like part of a song. The Valkyrie Armada arrived in the human solar system like a tide of death. 15,000 warships, each one a mountain of crystal and hate. They blocked out the stars themselves, casting shadows across worlds that had never known darkness. At their center flew the Eternal Dominion, the flagship of the Valkyrie Empire, home of the High Ascendant who had ruled for 3,000 years. They had come to end humanity. They had come to remind the galaxy who held the power. Elena Vasquez stood on the bridge of the Defiance and watched them come. Around Earth, the Allied fleet waited in formation. Ships from 47 species gathered together for the first time in 11,000 years. Old vessels pulled from mothballs. New designs built in desperate haste. Crews that had never worked together, speaking languages that barely translated, united by a common enemy. It was not enough. Elena knew it was not enough. The Allied fleet numbered perhaps 3,000 ships. They faced an enemy 5 times their size, with technology centuries ahead of their own. But they were there. That had to count for something. "All ships report ready," Lieutenant Chun said. He had aged years in the months since their first battle. Lines marked his face that had not been there before. But his hands were steady on his console. Elena nodded. She opened the channel to the entire fleet. "This is Commander Vasquez," she said. "You all know what we face. You all know the odds. Many of us will not survive this day. But I want you to know something." She paused, looking at the wall of crystal death approaching them. "I am proud to fight beside you. All of you. Humans and Sindari and Kethrathi and every other species that chose to stand. For 11,000 years, the Valkyrie have told the galaxy that resistance is pointless. Today, we prove them wrong. Today, we show them what free beings can do." Across the fleet, beings of 100 different shapes prepared for battle. Ketharan sat in the command chair of his own ship, surrounded by a crew of mixed species. His hands were shaking, but he did not try to hide it. The Valkyrie fleet opened fire. The first wave of attacks was devastating. Energy beams tore through space, turning Allied ships into expanding clouds of gas and debris. Gravity weapons crushed vessels like paper, crumpling them into nothing. Hundreds of ships died in the first minute, but the Allied fleet fought back. Human ships dove into the Valkyrie formation, releasing the weapons they had developed from stolen technology. Sindari vessels, designed for exploration, now carried bombs that disrupted Valkyrie systems. Kethrathi fighters, small and fast, targeted weak points that human scientists had identified. The Valkyrie began to take losses. Elena watched the battle unfold on her display. Points of light winked out on both sides, each one representing thousands of lives. She gave orders until her voice was raw, directing the chaos as best she could. Hours passed. The Allied fleet was pushed back, then rallied, then pushed back again. Earth hung behind them, blue and green and beautiful, the last line they could not allow to be crossed. On the Eternal Dominion, The High Ascendant watched with growing fury. This was supposed to be a demonstration, a reminder of Velkari power. Instead, it was becoming something else. Something that had not happened in 3,000 years. A real battle. Destroy them all, the High Ascendant commanded. Every ship, every station, every living thing on that planet. I want nothing left but ashes. The Velkari fleet began its final push. Elena saw it coming. The enemy formation was tightening, concentrating its fire, preparing to break through the Allied line and reach Earth. Her display showed the numbers, and the numbers were hopeless. They had destroyed perhaps 2,000 Velkari ships. 13,000 remained. "Ma'am," Lieutenant Chun said quietly. "Protocol Omega is ready." Elena closed her eyes. Protocol Omega, the last resort. A device hidden in the heart of Earth's sun, designed to turn the star itself into a weapon. It would release a directed burst of energy that would destroy every ship in the system. Friendly and enemy alike. It would also destroy Earth. The human scientists who designed it had called it the mutual assured destruction option. If humanity was going to die, they would take their enemies with them. They would never be enslaved. They would never become whispers. Elena looked at Earth on her view screen. 8 billion people lived there. Her family lived there. Everyone she had ever known lived there. "Not yet," she said. "Not while there is another way." But as she watched another wave of Allied ships die under Velkari fire, she wondered if there was another way at all. The battle raged on. The Allied fleet was breaking apart, scattered into pockets of desperate resistance. Catharan's ship had lost half its weapons and a third of its crew. The Defiance itself had taken heavy damage, and Elena could smell smoke in the recycled air. The Velkari fleet pressed forward, unstoppable. Inevitable. Elena reached for the Protocol Omega activation key. And then, from Earth, something unexpected happened. Every broadcast station on the planet began transmitting. Every communication array, every satellite, every device capable of sending a signal. They were all broadcasting the same thing. Music. Humanity was singing. The song rose from Earth like light rising from a star. 8 billion voices, joined together across every continent and every ocean. They sang in 100 languages, 1,000 dialects, 1,000,000 different ways. Old songs and new songs. Battle hymns and lullabies. The music of a species that had never learned to be silent. Catharan heard it on his damaged ship, and he did not understand. The battle was lost. The Velkari were advancing. Why would the humans waste their final moments singing? Then he listened closer. The songs were not surrender. They were not despair. They were defiance. Pure, stubborn, irrational defiance. The humans were facing extinction, and their response was to raise their voices louder. Something cracked open in Catharan's chest. Something that had been frozen for 80 cycles. He remembered his father, dragged away by Velkari enforcers, still shouting words of resistance. He remembered his mother, silenced by grief and fear. He remembered his people, once proud explorers and artists, reduced to servants who had forgotten how to dream. For 80 cycles, he had been a whisper. No more. Catharan opened a channel to every Sindari ship in the fleet. His voice shook, but he did not care. "Our ancestors sang," he said. "Before the Velkari came, we had songs that made the stars weep. I remember one of them. Will you sing it with me?" And he began to sing. The Sindari song joined the human voices. It was different, strange harmonies mixing with earth melodies, but somehow it worked. Other species heard the singing and remembered their own forgotten songs. The Kethrathi added their battle chants. The Oravani contributed their navigation hymns. Songs meant to guide ships through the dark spaces between galaxies, across the battlefield. The dying fleet began to sing. On the bridge of the Defiance, Elena Vasquez watched her display with tears streaming down her face. The Allied ships were moving, not retreating, not attacking blindly. They were forming up, coming together in ways that should have been impossible for vessels that had never trained together. The singing was doing something to them. It was connecting them. Species that had been enemies for millennia were flying in perfect formation, their movements synchronized by music rather than commands. "All ships," Elena said, her voice barely above a whisper, "follow the song." The Allied fleet surged forward as one, on the Eternal Dominion. The High Ascendant felt something it had not experienced in 3,000 years. Fear. The enemy fleet was broken, scattered, dying. But now they were moving with purpose, with unity, with something the Valkyrie could not understand. They were moving with joy. The Allied ships linked their power systems together. Technology from 47 species, designed by engineers who had never met, somehow functioning as one. Their weapons synchronized. Their shields merged. They became not a fleet but a single entity, driven by music and desperation and hope. The combined fire struck the Eternal Dominion at the same moment from 100 different angles. The flagship of the Valkyrie Empire, the symbol of 11,000 years of dominance, shattered like glass in a furnace. The High Ascendant died screaming a sound that no one heard because there was no air in space to carry it. The Valkyrie fleet saw their leader die and did something they had never done before. They panicked. Ships crashed into each other. Weapons fired wildly, hitting friend and enemy alike. The perfect order of the Valkyrie war machine collapsed into chaos. The Allied fleet did not stop singing. They did not stop fighting. They pushed forward through the debris of the Eternal Dominion and struck the confused enemy with everything they had left on by the time the last Valkyrie ship fled the solar system. The singing had spread across the entire Allied fleet. Humans and Sindari and Katharithi and 44 other species raised their voices together, celebrating survival, mourning their dead, declaring their freedom to the uncaring stars. Catharan sat in his command chair and sang until his voice gave out. Around him, his mixed crew sang their own songs, creating a harmony that no one had ever heard before. The war was not over. It would continue for another 10 years, a brutal struggle across 1,000 worlds. But something had changed in the human solar system, something that could never be unchanged. The whispers had become a chorus. The silence had become a song. Years later, when the final treaty was signed and the Valkyrie Empire existed only in history books, Catharan stood in the rebuilt Grand Assembly. Ambassador Sarah Chun, older now and walking with a cane, approached him after the ceremony. "We never could have won alone," she said. Catharan made the Sindari gesture of gentle disagreement. "You could have used your weapon. You could have destroyed everything rather than submit." "Yes," Chun agreed. "We could have. Why did you not?" Chun smiled, that strange human expression that meant so many things at once. "Because victory is not just surviving," she said. "It is having something worth surviving for. You reminded us of that. Every species that joined us, every ship that flew beside ours. You reminded us that the universe is better with all of us in it." Catharan looked at the assembly chamber. Representatives from species that were no longer whispers argued and laughed and debated. Free beings shaping their own future. "We were merely whispers to them," he said softly. "And now?" Chun asked. Catharan listened to the beautiful chaos around him. He thought of his father, who had died believing that freedom was possible. He thought of his mother, who had forgotten how to dream. He thought of all the generations of his people who had lived in silence. He thought of the song that had risen from earth and spread across the stars. "Now," he said, "we are a symphony." Chun nodded and reached out to take his hand. Human and Sindari, two species from opposite ends of the galaxy, standing together in a hall built by their enemies. Behind them, through the great windows of the assembly, the stars burned eternal. The same stars that had watched the Valkyrie rise and fall. The same stars that would watch whatever came next. But for the first time in 11,000 years, free beings looked up at those stars without fear. The whispers had found their voice, and the universe would never be silent again.